Paige Bueckers showing incredible leadership. You're Locked on UConn.
You are Locked on UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked on UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, I just want to take a minute and ask for a small favor. If you're enjoying the content, please take a second to subscribe to the show and follow. We're exploding all over YouTube right now with the addition of this women's program, and also because the men have done so well in the past couple of years. So every follow, every subscription, it all helps. Every download, it helps with us grow, but it also helps create more revenue for UConn NIL because Locked on UConn is donating 10% of all revenue to Bleeding Blue for Good. That's right. We're supporting the UConn NIL collective. And so by you supporting this show, you're directly supporting the UConn athletic program's efforts in NIL directly. Thank you for being a part of this community. We really appreciate it. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guarantee. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, let's get to today's show. I had an interesting first kind of segment here, which is Geno has talked about he wants Paige to step up and be more of a leader. And she's going to be a big storyline for us at Locked on UConn because, let's face it, guys, she's the best player in the country. One could argue Juju Watkins. But Paige at her height and her healthy, being healthy, she's going to be easily the best player in college basketball, likely the number one pick in the WNBA draft. So at least the odds on favorite. And that's one of the reasons why UConn is a betting favorite to win the national championship. Well, I got a sneak peek of one of the Huskies pickup games through their Twitter feed and some other, YouTube stuff. And I wanted to kind of give you some of my reflections and thoughts because I just thought it was fascinating. I have three key takeaways from that. But first, the first one, just to kind of give it some context, it's a content piece, right, for the UConn women. They give Paige a mic and she's mic'd up. So even if the ball's not with her, you can hear her in the background. That's why I felt like the leadership aspect of this is the theme. It's primarily meant to feature Paige, interacting with her teammates. So, while the focus was definitely on her, the scrimmage itself gave kind of some really interesting insights, although it being a scrimmage. So take it with a grain of salt. But let's jump into it. So Paige Bueckers' leadership, my absolutely first takeaway, but not in the way you'd expect. We already know how great she is on the floor, but what stood out to me was her voice and her presence, even when she wasn't in action. It was clear that this piece was designed for her, following her perspective, but it came through in her leadership, showing her leadership on and off the ball. The way she was talking to Ayanna Patterson, our talented redshirt sophomore, really showed her maturity and understanding of the game. Paige was firm but encouraging. I think so that's one of the best teammates you can have is someone that's holding you accountable but not demeaning you in that respect. The way she was talking to her was fantastic, and Paige was giving Ayanna the kind of feedback that players need when they're still kind of finding their rhythm. And I think Ayanna's a talented player, and she's going to help us. She was particularly instructive when discussing how Ayanna needs to work with Ice, and they work off of each other on rotation. And that's just leadership in action. And it's about making other players better because she knows she wants to win that elusive championship at UConn. A word I never thought I would ever utter or a phrase I never thought I would utter with the UConn women, that their star player is looking for their first title in 4 years. But we know the circumstances, injury and whatnot. The second takeaway, I love KK Arnold. I think she's fantastic. She's a playmaker. We didn't see a ton of her in this sneak peek, but what we did see was really promising. A couple of plays stood out to me in particular, where one, she used her ball handling to get an open bucket on an up and under pass to Ice Brady, where she kind of like went hard to the hole, faked up, and then she got the defender to jump, and then she dished it off late to Ice for an easy bucket. And another where she drove and kicked it out to Ashlyn Shade for a three. Ashlyn, she's going to be huge for us this year. Absolute knockdown, draining threes left and right. We need those knockdowns from her and our shooters this year. But KK's ability to drive and create space and create opportunities for others, and including herself, really kind of helps with everything that UConn is going to be relying on with this motion offense as the season progresses. So the guard position is going to be a battle and in the Big East, and I'm excited to see how KK steps up to the challenge as she did last year. But I think that extra year of improvement, some of the stuff we talked about in the men's show about Haas making that jump from a 6-man to kind of an elite player in the Big East, I think we can say the same thing for KK, even though she started and had some really great moments. I think we can really, if we see an uptick in her production, this team is going to be in another stratosphere. Same thing, takeaway with Ice Brady. I feel like she's put in some incredible offseason work. Just in watching her handle herself. First off, last year she was phenomenal in helping UConn kind of stave off the injury bug in terms of, having to jump into that and not really expected to play that role, but did it in a really fantastic way. But she's looked solid, especially finishing through contact. It's clear she's put in some work in this offseason. Her post moves look smooth and really improved, not as kind of bullish like they were last year, where I feel like she was kind of trying to use her size to kind of get through people. She looked very polished. She was finishing around the basket with confidence. And even though this was just a pickup game against some of the guys who helped train the team, it was great to see her improvement. And yes, it's just a scrimmage, and I'm not putting all stock into this, but we're at that point now. We're 3 days away from basketball season, where we're counting down the days to live action. And trust me, I am super excited about it. But it's fun to see this kind of progression, and it's fun to see this type of live action, if you will, even if it's through YouTube and other areas. Ice is going to be fantastic for us, and she's going to be a force in the paint this season, and her ability to score inside is something UConn will 100% depend on. So before we get to the next segment, I'll take a quick sip of water. Watching the scrimmage, I have a thoughts from when I was about 14. Dreaming about being one of those guys who got to practice and play against these D1 fantastic women's basketball players. I would say that to my dad all the time. I'm like, I'm gonna be one of those guys. I'm gonna play against the women in practice. Because let's face it, when I was 14, I was probably as tall as I was gonna get. I may be touching 6 foot with shoes on, but I'm 5'10", 5'11". And I remember that because after UConn's 1995 championship, Geno Auriemma started using men to practice against his team, and it became a key part of the success. And I remember hearing about Greg Yeomans, who later walked onto the men's team, and how Geno liked what he saw in those early practices, and I always wanted to be one of those guys, the ones who helped push the women team to their limits. I probably wouldn't have made it onto the floor, but that's another story for another day. My story didn't take me to UConn, but I did get to live out a similar experience playing pickup games at UNCG in Greensboro. It was kind of a mix of grad assistants, managers, former players from both the men's and women's side. I remember playing against a former Duke player who had just come off a Sweet 16 run in 2018, and she absolutely dominated me on both ends of the floor. It was a humbling experience, not just because she's a woman and I'm a man, but because she was taking no prisoners. She was dominating most of the players on the court, men, women. I mean, if there were children out there, she probably would have dunked on them. So walking out of those pickup games, I wasn't dejected. I just realized how far off I was from being able to think about playing against players like Jennifer Rosati or Nikisha Sales at that time. So that experience put it into perspective for me as an older man, and I gained a newfound respect for the level of talent it takes to compete at that stage. One in particular moment, I went up for a rebound, and this woman who played against me and the Duke player, she came over the back and literally jumped, not over me, but on top of me, snatched the rebound and put up a layup. And I'm like on the floor face down, like, what just happened? She pushed me, and they said she pushed me, like, for sure. Like, it's pickups where no one's calling fouls. I think someone tried to, and she just looked at him like, are you serious? So yes. So I have a lot of respect for the guys who help out the women's team and the talent of these players. And guess what? From 1995 to now, the talent of these players has only grown. So watching Paige, KK, Ice, Ashlyn, all of the group out there, Ayanna, I have to tip my hat to the guys practicing against them because it can't be easy. I know firsthand what it's like to get just beat by a better player, and men, women, doesn't matter. But that always stuck with me because I wanted to be one of those guys. So those kind of moments really kind of build the championship teams. And I'm sure those guys are walking off the court with a deep appreciation for the talent they're up against. And at the end of the day, the sneak peek was a great insight into the team's chemistry. I feel like I love how Paige is leading and how the younger players are responding to her and stepping up. You can see an intensity in their eyes. I feel like there's some unfinished business. There's a bigger story behind these scrimmages. And I feel like this is going to help. These kind of moments help shape the season. And all those little moments are what are the connective tissue for the season. And it's going to be a fun ride watching how it all unfolds. Well, let's go pay some bills and come back and let's talk about a phenomenal prospect that we are going to dive into. Bianca Quinones is a problem. What's up, everyone? It's your old pal, Mark Zanetto here with FanDuel.com. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Let's talk about tonight's slate of games, which is essentially Tampa Bay and the Atlanta Falcons. So Bucks and Falcons at Atlanta, in hot Atlanta, at the Mercedes-Benz Dome. My favorite play of the night, because I do feel like these two teams are going to air it out. I think Atlanta wants to run the ball, but I feel like Tampa Bay's going to score a bunch of points. So to keep up, think about this parlay. It's a +2,885. It actually went down since I last talked about it on the men's show. But Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, anytime touchdown, $10 wins you $288.60. I think a lot of people are playing on it. I think it says 16,318 people placed it. Not a huge parlay guy, but some of these are almost too good to pass up for a small little wager. $10 to win almost 300. It's not bad. Go to America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel. And if you're a new bettor, you can bet $5 on that and then get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Go to FanDuel.com to check it out. Okay, let's get the FanDuel promo off, although I don't even know if I'll throw any money on that tonight. We'll see. But I do know what I'm throwing my stock behind, and it's Bianca Quinones. A fantastic get for Geno Auriemma and UConn. She is a 6'1" wing from Ecuador who recently committed as a part of UConn's 2025 class. We talked about it a little bit yesterday, but I wanted to do a deeper dive because this is a big deal for Geno Auriemma. And if you watch even just one YouTube clip, just one, you will know exactly why I'm so excited about this prospect. Let's talk defense first, because that's what everyone asks. Oh, can she play defense? Remember, anybody that Geno or Dan Hurley recruits, they will be asked to play defense, and they will play defense, or they won't be here. She's got stunningly quick hands. She's 6'1", but she can guard smaller guards because her footwork is phenomenal, balletic, if you will. Okay, and I've seen some clips where someone tries to cross her up and she just flicks it, and it's just she's picking pockets out there, and it disrupts offenses, and you can see it right from the start, which is going to be a phenomenal thing for UConn. Although Geno's probably not going to want her to reach all the time, and I'm not saying she's going to, just to have that ability to disrupt a defender and likely get some steals off of it. And there's no contact. That's the thing. Like, a lot of times when you try to reach like that, the player bumps into you with their body because they're going forward. But she's been able to kind of perfect this little, slide, tap of the ball, and then she's off to the races in transition. So, but even like at 6'1", the athleticism to come down rotationally and be an exceptional help defender and block shots, honestly, watch some clips, coming out of nowhere sometimes as a trail defender. She has this cat-like quickness and instincts that make her an absolute nightmare for opposing offenses. And that's going to translate beautifully in UConn's high-pressure defense. Now, beyond defense, Quinones is incredibly athletic. This is someone who can run the floor and dominate in transition. When you watch her, it's clear that she's smooth in transition. Like, one of the clips is go to I'm gonna give him a pub here because we may have him on the show. Alfred Corriat. and I'm going to give you his Twitter handle is at ALFCORRIETTE. He just started following me because I reached out to him about coming on and talking about Bianca, because I feel like she's just I hate to use the word transformative, but I mean, first off, it's historic because she's South American, first South American player to ever play at UConn. I think men's or women's, but he does scouting breakdowns with an international focus. So I wanted to get his thoughts, and he posted some really great clips of Bianca, and one of them is a transition where she gets the ball on the right hash, and she does like a complete Euro step through a defender for a reverse layup. Some of the best women's players in the game don't have that in their game. And if you are correcting me on that, I've been watching women's basketball since 1995. I probably since earlier than that, but what I remember. And you just don't see it as smooth. Maybe they have it, maybe it's a little clunkier, but Bianca looks different, is what I'm trying to say. And that, you know, I'm giving her props without trying to disparage anybody else that does similar things. But man, it's kind of the same thing when you hear about people who have power when they hit a baseball or a softball, and like it sounds different coming off of the bat. That's what I'm talking about with Bianca. She just looks different. She looks different in the way that she moves. She looks different in the way that she plays the game. And I think she's going to be phenomenal for us. Also, check him out. Check out Alfred's stuff to kind of look at some of these YouTube clips that are just incredible. You know, I think some of the stuff that I'm interested in is how she adjusts to the American game. But we're going to talk about that in the next segment. But I think the thing that's interesting to me is she has an ability to go from defense to offense like that. She's a true all-around game. Should be the kind of player that UConn fans get on their feet for and have an ability to run the floor and finish plays. Another standout aspect of her game is her shooting. Again, check out these clips. She's a legitimate threat from beyond the arc, like a plus 3-point shooter, which is critical in today's game, but also just gives her that versatility that like you can't put her in a box. You can't. She's 6'1", so I don't think she's gonna be posting that much, but she has that ability. She has some of that back to the basket game. But she's also an incredible downhill driver of the basket. You got a player who can do it all offensively. And she's someone who can space the floor, knock down shots, and still get to the rim when it's needed. So that's the kind of offensive versatility that's going to make her a huge asset for Geno. When we return, let's talk about a little bit more about Bianca and kind of dive into the schedule. We don't have as many details on the women's side as we do on the men's in terms of like days and times. And we have the days, but we don't have the times and where you can watch. But we'll talk about Bianca and a little bit about the schedule coming up after this. All right, you're back on Locked On UConn, talking Bianca Quinones. We talked a little bit in the first segment about Paige's leadership in the impressions from practice, from Ayanna Patterson to Ice Brady to Ashlyn Shade, KK Arnold. Those are the people that were prominent in the video. So I'm not just picking and choosing who I want to talk about, just so you guys know. But yeah, Bianca Quinones, I have to continue talking about her because I'm telling you when I say this, I'm not hyping her up for no reason. Look, if you don't believe me, check it out for yourself. Go see my guys' Twitter, Alfred Coriette. I think the biggest thing that I love about her is she already has. She's not just coming from like high school. Even I know some of these high schools like Monteverde and IMG Academy they're basically like college level players playing all the time. But she's playing professional basketball right now at a very high level. She's been competing in Italy's Series A1 division, where she's held her own against top competition. Last season, she averaged 10 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, and 2 steals. See the all-around game? Those are incredibly impressive stats for a 17-year-old in one of Europe's best leagues. And they show just how polished her game is already. But let's not forget, this is UConn, right? They're not just looking for, and Geno's not just looking for players with potential. They want players who are ready to make an impact immediately. And I know Geno's history of playing freshmen, but I think he's going to have a hard time not finding minutes for Bianca. And I think that's exactly what we'll see from Quinones, which is her maybe not breaking the starting lineup because this UConn team is deep and they're probably going to return some big time players as well as other recruits. But she's special, guys. I'm telling you, she can be a player that steps in and makes an impact from day one. Absolutely. We've seen her athleticism, her defense, her shooting translate at the professional level already. That's already a step up from even some of the top players in the college game. And I think it's going to give her a leg up when she steps onto the court at UConn. There's no doubt that Bianca Quinones is a fantastic get for UConn. She's someone who brings a complete package. She's athletic. She plays defense, both on the ball and off it. She's a shooter. She can spot up. She can also take you off the dribble. And she just possesses the type of complete package that you don't see all the time. I'm telling you, if you could watch one clip, watch the transition of her going from offense to defense and doing a Euro step and finishing on the reverse side. It's phenomenal. It's like what we call a chef's kiss. She's a player who can help UConn compete for championships. And I know that that's what Geno wants to do in this. I don't want to call it his last contract, but his contract extension for 5 years, what could likely be or could potentially be his last contract. Why not add players that you can win multiple championships with? And Bianca is one of those players. It's exciting to think about. And I think she's going to bring some phenomenal skill sets to this 2025 recruiting class. Real quick, if you are a North Carolina UConn fan, as I am, meaning you live in North Carolina and you're a UConn fan, the game I'm looking forward to the most this season, not just because it's against North Carolina, but it's here in my adopted hometown, Greensboro, North Carolina, in the Coliseum, a place that I know very well, that I spent numerous nights covering UNCG basketball, covering the SoCon. I am absolutely looking forward to the November 15th, 6 o'clock game on ESPN2, UConn versus North Carolina. I am going to be there in one capacity or the other, either cheering my you-know-what off or hopefully in the media room covering the game for Locked On Podcast Network and for the Locked On fans. So if you're in North Carolina and you're going to go to that game and you're a fan of the show, reach out to me. I'd love to hang out with you guys before the game. I'm not going to be able to spend a ton of time. We have young kids, but I definitely am going to go and try to make that like the one event here that I can go to that's super easy for me to get to. I live 10 minutes away from the Greensboro Coliseum. So it is a phenomenal opportunity for me and for the UConn women to come down here and show North Carolinians in what's considered the hoop state, what the basketball capital of the world is capable of. So I'm looking forward to that. Obviously, the USC game is super attractive. What else? I think always playing at Tennessee. I would imagine my mother-in-law would love to see us come to Knoxville to watch the Lady Vols play the UConn women on February 6th. Maybe that's possible. Would love to see it happen. And then, of course, at South Carolina. That's also one that I could potentially go to. The Gamecocks aren't too far away. So anyway, I'm really looking forward to those matchups, in particular, obviously, the one here locally in Greensboro for me. This has been another episode of Locked On UConn. Really appreciate you guys supporting the women's show as much as the men's. And I'm sorry it took so long to get started. Like I said, just needed to find the bandwidth and the time. And now I got it. So you got to see my ugly mug for two times a day. And I'm so looking forward to the rest of the season. Thanks for being a part of this show. This has been another episode of Locked On UConn. I'm your host, Mark Zanetto, asking you to stay locked in, stay locked on. And as always, go Huskies.